On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach drop the F-bomb. That's right, fines. I am your host, Sal Mercogliano, chair of the Department of History, Criminal Justice, and Political Science here at Campbell University, and a former merchant mariner. So first off, I want to thank all my Patreon contributors because I have today a new microphone that's being used. So hopefully the quality is a little bit better in my audio. So thank you all for contributing to Patreon. Today's episode is based on a series of tweets I did last night on an announcement that just came out from the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And as I mentioned in the intro, they're dropping the F-bomb. So this is the announcement from the port of Los Angeles. There's a similar announcement here from the port of Long Beach. But basically what they're saying here is in an effort to improve cargo movement and amid congestion and record volume, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles will begin assessing a surcharge to ocean carriers for import containers that dwell on marine terminals. Under the new policy, the ports will charge ocean carriers for each container that falls into one of two categories. In the case of containers scheduled to move by truck, ocean carriers, these are the big shipping companies, will be charged for every container dwelling 9 days or more. For containers moving by rail, ocean carriers will be charged if the container has dwelled for 3 days or more. I should mention that just changed. They've just announced a change from 3 days to 6 days. Beginning November 1st, ports will charge ocean carriers with cargo in those two categories $100 per container, increasing in $100 increments per day. Okay. They are going to charge the ocean carriers, the big shipping firms that carry the goods across the Pacific to their terminals and drop them off, late fees because trucks and rail aren't coming in and taking them off. Pardon my language, but what the hell do the carriers have to do with that? They have no control over that beyond the fact that they're delivering the cargo to the terminals to be picked up. You are literally imposing a late fee on the carriers for getting that cargo off. I should also go on here to mention further down in here, I support the actions taken by the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach today to charge ocean carriers for lingering containers on marine terminals. These actions aim to expedite the movement of goods and reduce congestion in our ports, says John D. Picari, port envoy on the Biden-Harris Supply Chain Distributions Task Force. As our economy continues to grow, increased demand and disruptions caused by the pandemic are putting our supply chains to the test. While we've seen new records set in terms of throughput this year at West Coast ports, that's true. We're moving more cargo than ever before, record numbers. We need more players throughout the supply chain to keep stepping up. The federal government will continue to bring together private companies and stakeholders from across the supply chain and serve as an honest broker helping to surface solutions like this to address supply chain disruptions. All right, time. They are not an honest broker in this. Let me be clear. John Picari, first off, shouldn't have nothing to do with this. If the Biden-Harris administration wanted to point somebody to this, appoint a maritime administrator. Why you appoint John Picari to be this port envoy, I don't know. Beyond the fact that if you don't think you can get him confirmed as maritime administrator, I don't know. But this should be the maritime administrator. This should be the maritime administrator. The other person it should be is the 5-person Federal Maritime Commission. The reason they're doing this, let me be clear, the whole reason they're doing this is because they cannot get at the big ocean carriers, Maersk, MSC, Hauppauge, Costco, Evergreen, HMM. They can't get at them. They have no way to get at them. They cannot get to them. And so what are they doing? They're having the ports do it for them. The shipping companies are making record profits. We know that. This next quarter is going to be ridiculous in the profits they make. Now, let me be clear. Shipping companies were not making profits before this. So they're finally making profits. But the administration has got to show, and let me be clear, I am not a fan of Biden-Harris administration. I'm not a fan of Trump, whoever administration. I'm not a fan of any administration. I am talking about shipping, and that is my view. And right here, this is an effort for the Port of LA and Port of Long Beach to get at this. And we see this playing out right now. And what they're going to do is charge a $100 fee on these containers that are sitting on these ports over those set amount of days. And I'm going to ask a very straightforward question. Do they honestly think that Maersk, MSC, and all the big ocean carriers are going to pay that? They will, but they're not going to pay it. They're going to roll that surcharge on to the shippers who are pushing the goods through. So one of the things I do is I follow good people on social media, people who know the industry and report on it and are involved in it. And so one of the ones I followed posted this the other day, sitting there saying, this is the tariff rule detail that some of the carriers have, and they call this their pass-through charges. In addition to any other applicable rates and charges imposed by carrier under any other provisions of this tariff or in any service contract, the shipper shall be liable for payment of any charges or surcharges imposed on the carrier by any marine terminal. Carrier's not going to pay for this. Whoever's hauling the cargo is going to pay for this. They're putting a $100 tax on the cargo coming in, and it's not going to hurt the carrier at all. I should also add, Steve Ferreira, whose show I was on the other day on FreightWaves B2B, put this on his site on LinkedIn, where he talks about the fact that a tariff item indicates a date or a deferred item. The effective date of such item shall be 31 days following the publication of the ordinance. You cannot just arbitrarily sit there and say on October 26th, hey, on November 1st, we're imposing a tariff. You've got to wait 31 days according to the rules set out for the Port of LA. And so I will also mention that Steve found another item that I think was equally interesting, that the Port of LA and Long Beach give the shipping companies $10 a box incentive to come to the Port of LA and Long Beach. Hey, you want to bring your containers to the Port of LA and Long Beach? We're going to give you $10. We'll give you $10, and we're going to include your containers in our routing system, in our tracking system. We're going to give you $10. So my question right off the bat is, LA Long Beach, are you going to be fining everybody $100 per day that the container sits on your terminal? And are you still paying them $10 to deliver that? Or are you just, is it the net going to be $90? What's going on here? Because it seems like you're playing both ends here at the same time. Then on the opposite spectrum, you have LA and Long Beach imposing fines, F-bombs in my opinion. And then you have the major railroads, Union Pacific, Norfolk Southern, offer incentives to move containers away from LA and Long Beach. Story right here. Joanne Marsh in FreightWaves talking about incentives to start moving containers by rail. And where's the coordination? It's obvious that John Picari, the port envoy for this task force set up under the administration, is the one that pushed this through LA and Long Beach. And I don't know what they're thinking. I really don't. I'm really at a loss here, because there's another element that plays into this too. I watched Gene Soroka's talk for the performance over the past month. Gene does a great job. He's a master speaker, and he does a very well scripted, whoever writes his stuff is great, comes out and gave this talk. And here's this brief that came out. This is the notice that the Port of LA came out with. Year-to-date growth at 26% at America's busiest port. Record September, 903,000 TEUs moved through the port. But I want to break that down for a second. Now, remember, Long Beach is also here too. So you got LA and Long Beach. Long Beach is separate than LA. So busiest September ever in the port's 114-year history. Sorry, been talking a lot today. Year to date, overall cargo volume stands at almost 8.2 million TEU, an increase of 26%. Well, he's got some figures in here that I think is really interesting. And it's right here. September 21, loaded imports reached 468,059 TEUs. It's about the same amount compared to the previous year. Loaded exports dropped 42% to 75,714. TEUs compared to the same period last year. It's the lowest level since 2002. We are exporting the lowest level since 2002. Yet when you look at export containers, empty containers climbed to 360,092 TEUs, a jump of 28%. In total, September, 903,000 TEUs was 2.3% above last September. All right. Take a second. 468,000 TEUs imported, and 435,000 exported. That's a difference of 7%. But of the exported containers, 360,000 of them are empty. 82% of the containers we're shipping out of LA are empty. And now you can go back and look at historical data on this. You can look, for example, here's 2020 versus 2021. You can see the total number of empties right here. You can see the difference here. Loaded exports is down almost 42%, whereas empty containers are up almost 28%. And you can get in, and I'll have this data for you. You can break it up and go into here and look at it all you want. You can look at it, and if you go, especially look from 2015 on, when all of a sudden the port experienced its rise, one of the things you see is we're exporting a heck of a lot more empty containers than full. Again, you go back to 2002 till you find us in that situation. And that raises the question, well, wait a minute. If we're exporting more empty containers, is that contributing to the problem? I talked about the story recently about Felixstowe preventing empty containers coming on the terminal. And that was a decision not of the government of UK, but the terminal at Felixstowe. So I'm going to use a couple of diagrams here, and I want to give you the source of these diagrams because it is a fantastic source. If you want to understand port operations, if you want to understand what's going on with the ports, it's hard for me to go in a lot of detail. So I would recommend you over to this book right here, Port Economics, Management, and Policy. You can buy the book, but it is online at porteconomicsmanagement.org. And they update this. This thing is great. I use this for my graduate level course in maritime industry policy. It's got sections on ports and maritime shipping, contemporary ports, terminals, port governance, competition, performance, you name it. And there's even a case study in here about competition between the ports of LA and Long Beach, the impact of COVID-19. They're updating this stuff all the time. It is fantastic. Recommend you go to it and take your time, and you can drill down through articles. It links you over. It's fantastic. So what we're talking about here in this situation is this movement through the ports. And ports serve as gateways, either using rail, road, or coastal. And we have that way to get the cargo moving. And one of the things we're seeing right now is an issue. I raised this issue the other day. If we're at the lowest level of export since 2002 in the port of Long Beach, and I mean the port of LA, but also in Long Beach, there's a problem going on here. This shows you the normal import that happens. You bring an import container in, you take it to your first tier port logistics, you store the container, you destuff it, you transload it, you put new goods in it, or you reposition it, and then you either store it full or you leave it empty, you stuff it in, and you export it, and you basically move that container. There's a better diagram here I think I have for you right here. So in a truly balanced scenario right here, you have your container empty, you load it, you ship it, you offload it, you take it over to another point, and then you ship it out and you return it. Nice closed cycle. Well, we have a trade imbalance overseas. We're not exporting as much as we normally do. So what we have is this imbalance going on. Now you can have a hybrid, which is what we should be. We should be in this hybrid situation. This hybrid situation is you bring containers in, you're bringing in more containers than you need for export. So some of those containers should go immediately back. Some of those containers should be restuffed and sent back in exports. But what we're doing here is getting imbalance. This hybrid model is not happening. We are not taking the containers after we empty them, bringing them to sites to load, back to the terminal for loading, and then back overseas. Because think about it, when we drop that container back off in Asia, it can go right to a site to be loaded. It doesn't have to be unstuffed, which means it's ready faster. We have tilted the scales in the global marine transportation. What we're seeing here is not this hybrid model, which again skews more toward Asia versus us, but now it's totally imbalanced, totally out of balance. And instead, what we see piling up in the terminals here are empty containers, empty containers. And again, the motivation here isn't to deal with the empty containers. It's not, trucks are coming back with the chassis with the empty containers on. We need to get the empty containers out of the yard. We need to get them out. And we don't need to be sending them back. We need to be prioritizing export containers. The terminals should be making rules to limit the number of export containers. The person who should be doing this, the organization that should be doing this, is the Federal Maritime Commission, but they are nowhere to be seen. This is a graph from that case study that shows you the growth of the ports of LA and Long Beach. So right here, you see 1980, 1984, you deregulate, 1998, you continue the deregulation, and then you see this massive, massive spike to the 2008 recession. You see the dip here, then you see that kind of gradual growth. You see the dip coming in here with the trade war in 2019 and then COVID. But this black line represents the percent of market share LA and Long Beach represent. And you can see the influence that it has. And one of the things we start to see here is right here is how the marine terminals process those containers and how they go out. And the importance of things like the Alameda corridor, for example, that handles about 35% of the containers that are coming through there. Rail handling about 9%. And then the off-dock rail yards heading out to distribution centers and then into rail, not off the facility, but to local distribution centers and out, handling about 23%. And then others going out in other ways through distribution centers, through trucks, in other methods. This rail up here versus truck down here. So you get this division right here of why this is so important. How are you moving these containers out? Again, you need to get trucks over to the distribution center. You need to get the rails, the off-dock rail yards, the near-dock rail yards, and on-dock rail yards, all working to get out to the destinations or distribution centers. Same thing with trucks. And flagging the companies to be responsible, the ocean carriers to do this, is, in my opinion, a complete miss of what's going on. Don't get me wrong, the ocean carriers can play a part here. Here's an idea. Stop sailing your ships. Stop stacking your ships up. Slow down the voyages. Make sure you're loading full containers versus empty containers, or at least go back to the historical level that they were in the past, which was about maybe 2/3 to 1/3 full to empty. But right now, we're just completely skewed. We're completely skewed. And as Soroka said, we're moving more empties than ever before. You got to go back to 2002 to find it when we're moving more than 82% of the containers moving are empty. At least if we go back to that 1-to-2 ratio, one third loaded, 2/3 empty, that would alleviate this just a little bit. But now it's so skewed out. And understand, exports are essential. We have the right to do this with the carriers. Go back and read the Shipping Act of 1984 and the addendum in 98. We have the right to do this to the carriers, but the carriers are only going to do it if we force them to do it. And that's where the FMC and the Maritime Administration, and obviously John Picari, who has no official role here except for being a port envoy on this task force. So this is my rant for today in why the port's announcement of these fines, F-bombs, really, in my opinion, is not going to do anything more than pass costs on to the consumer and the shippers. So again, another cheery note from Sal and what's going on with shipping. If you like the video, again, I don't know how anybody would, but if you did, please subscribe. Please hit the bell to be alerted about new videos. Give it a thumbs up. leave a comment, share it across social media. And if you do contribute to my Patreon page, and I will go out and individually thank all my Patreon contributors, you can contribute to the show as demonstrated by, look at this. This is my brand new mic. Looks all professional and everything. It looks great. Hopefully it sounds great. So that I appreciate. That's the type of stuff I use your contributions to do. I talked about getting a sound mixer, obviously for that one video I did, it didn't sound mix very well, but I appreciate that. Thank you so much. As a lowly college professor, I appreciate your contributing to the channel and helping me keep bringing you what's going on with shipping. Until next time, Sal, signing off.